everyone, and welcome to a new episode from our podcast Land Talks, brought to you by the G20 Global Land Initiative. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Susan Chomba with us. Susan, welcome to our podcast. We are so happy to have you today.
Thank you so much, and it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Susan, would you please give us an introduction about yourself?
Well, my name is Susan Chomba, and I'm the director for Food, Land and Water in WRI Africa. WRI is World Resources Institute, and we work across many countries in Africa addressing issues of land degradation, issues of food security, water security, and how they interact with people and nature and climate.
Impressive. Thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about the scale of land loss in Africa. Can you shed light on the scale of land loss in Africa and its impact on livelihoods across the continent?
Land loss or land degradation is a massive problem for the continent. At least 2/3 of the land that is under cultivation, or what we call arable land, is actually degraded, which means it has lost fertility and it has lost the ability to support life, both life for microorganisms as well as life for plants. And that means that our agriculture productivity is declining because the land is degraded. And with declining agriculture productivity, it means that we are not able to feed our rapidly growing population with healthy and nutritious food. On the other hand, when land fertility declines, farmers tend to move to new areas. So they go and clear natural ecosystems, whether it's grasslands or whether it's forests, in order to find more fertile land for growing their crops. And that continues to drive deforestation and land degradation. So you extend into new spheres, which means we are losing our biodiversity, we are losing our forest. The other element of it is to think about then when they clear the vegetation, what happens to the carbon that is stored in this vegetation. If they do burning or if they clear the biomass, then it means that we are losing the carbon that is stored in both the soils as well as in the vegetation, and therefore releasing emissions into the atmosphere and continuously adding to what we already have in the atmosphere. So land loss, land degradation is a primary driver for declining productivity, for increasing poverty and vulnerability, for loss of biodiversity, as well as climate change.
Thank you so much. This was perfectly explained. Thank you, Susan. So, talking about interconnected challenges, how do biodiversity, conservation, poverty reduction, gender equity, agriculture, and climate change mitigation intersect? And what opportunities do these connections offer for addressing land degradation?
That's quite a complex question. But let's start from the point of land and people. How people relate with their land can help us to show all the interconnectedness between the dimensions that you've mentioned. So poverty means that people are continuously trying to derive resources from their lands. We've seen, for instance, in more developed societies where you have, alternative economic activities or industrialization, people tend to move, and therefore you're left with few farmers growing food for more people. But in developing countries, we have millions, hundreds of thousands of smallholder farmers, and cumulatively into millions that are producing food for us. It's a good thing. But on the other hand, is that if we do not have sufficient resources to build our soil health, then the farmers continuously mine the nutrients by trying to grow food without putting enough inputs, and especially good inputs that are not going to kill the microorganisms in the soil. And so if you look at the relationship between people and especially poor people and land, that's when you start seeing land degradation. And that's when you start seeing what I call the extensification that's moving into natural ecosystems, because people don't have the resources to buy the inputs that they need into the soil.
Yes.
Or sometimes they don't have the knowledge and the capacity to get the good inputs. And so you have that biodiversity loss that is driven by area extensification into natural ecosystems, but also that is driven by unsustainable agriculture practices, the use of pesticides, the use of chemical inputs, kill the pollinators, it kills other biodiversity. When you look at the water pollution, if the pesticides get into the water, it kills the microorganisms in the water, including poisoning the food that is in water, like fish and other things that we need. So it all starts with the connectedness between people and their land, and the capacity that people have to manage land effectively. If you can do that, you can see what we call the feedback effects of positive elements into biodiversity as well as positive elements into climate change. So you start with the people and their relationship with their land.
Yeah, you're totally right. So, talking about urgent priorities in land loss, from your perspective, what is the most urgent issue related to land loss in Africa that requires immediate attention?
I think the most important issue in Africa, we would have to start with the soils, the declining soil fertility. If we can address that immediately, then we can be able to produce more healthy food from the existing land, and we can be able to limit the expansion into natural ecosystems. That is what we call land restoration. So turning the problem around from seeing the problem into seeing the solution. So in fact, a lot of our work as World Resources Institute, what we've produced are not maps of land degradation. We have produced what we call the opportunities for restoration. So you see that challenge as an opportunity. And so if you see that as an opportunity, you start asking yourselves, how can we be able to leverage on the resources that we have to capitalize on the opportunity of restoring land? And what are those resources? Fantastic innovations from our youth. We have the fastest growing youth population in the world. They are innovative. They are thinking about how to solve our problems. I can tell you for sure, when I go to the field or when I go out there out of my office, the people who inspire me the most are our youth. They are continuously looking at technologies that can be able to build our soil health. Can I give you an example?
Please.
Yes, so one of those that has really been inspiring for me is how they are using organic waste. Organic waste that is a problem for our cities, solid waste. Do you know 70% of the waste that we generate in our cities, primary cities and secondary cities, is organic waste, from food losses, from waste in terms of parts of the food that cannot be used. And they are using technologies including, for instance, black soldier fly, which is a fly that can consume that waste and convert it within a few days, relatively 2 to 3 weeks, into organic compost. And then you can take that organic compost and take it back into the soil. So there are technologies that the youth are coming up with that are absolutely mind-blowing. And you can see how you can close the loop of nutrients from what we see as waste that is generating methane in the cities, that is causing pollution, to something beautiful that can be taken back to the farms and build the soil health. And that's just one of them. There are so many that we can see from our young people. And so with a little bit of support, capacity, financing, business models, our young people can actually be the solutions for the problems that we have, helping to restore the soil health, helping to create business models around landscape restoration, helping to create business models around conservation that can really drive economic development that is sustainable in Africa.
I can hear the voice of hope coming from your voice as well. So, Susan, shaping the land restoration agenda, let's talk about this a little bit. As we move forward, how can we shape a more effective and inclusive land restoration agenda that aligns with Africa's unique challenges and opportunities?
No, thank you so much for the question. So we've done a lot as a continent, especially in mobilizing political ambition for restoration. We have two major initiatives on the continent. Africa Forest Restoration Initiative, AFR 100, which is aiming to restore 100 million hectares across the continent. This is country-led, with governments committing to restore certain millions of hectares. Each country has got its own targets. On the other hand, we have a sister program that is called the Great Green Wall of the Sahel, mainly the Sahelian belt. And all of this have been fantastic in mobilizing political commitment at the regional level as well as at the national level. But for us to see equitable, effective, sustainable restoration, we've got to think about bottom-up approaches. We've got to think about how do we work with the thousands of groups, either they are youth groups, women groups, whether they are cooperatives of farmers, and all these associations that are on the ground that we can be able to work with, because at the end of the day, restoration is local, and different kind of restoration practices will be required for different areas. The kind of restoration that is needed for grasslands or pastoral areas is very different from restoration of wetlands. It's going to be different from restoration of forested areas. It's going to be different from restoration of mangroves. And
So
it's communities.
localization is the key.
It is the key. It is the key. Localization in terms of the practices, but also in terms of those who are driving it are people at the local level. And we have to be able to provide them with all the support that they need to be able to scale restoration across the continent.
So my final question for you today is about the universal truth of land restoration based on your experience. What is one universal truth about land restoration? Something you are certain will happen when restoring land in the ecosystems and landscape you focus on?
There are several universal truths, but let me say this. Restored, thriving landscapes are going to be good for people, for our communities,
Yes.
good for nature, for our biodiversity, and good for climate. Those are truths. If we can restore those ecosystems, we're going to have better livelihoods, sustainable livelihoods, empowered communities, as well as greater biodiversity and more resilient ecosystems and people when it comes to climate change.
I don't want this conversation to end, but sadly, we have come to the end of our episode. We are so grateful that you were with us today. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we hope we can meet again. And for our dear listeners, allow me to thank Susan Chomba for being here. And wait us, stay tuned for more and more episodes from our podcast, Land Talks. Thank you so much and see you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.